Victoria Sterling had perfected the art of invisibility. For 7 years, she had lived in the modest ranch house on Maple Street, her days filled with grocery shopping at discount stores, clipping coupons, and preparing elaborate dinners for her husband Marcus. To her neighbors, she was simply Mrs. Blackwood, the quiet woman who tended her small garden and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with fading paint. The morning routine never varied. Victoria would wake at dawn, brew coffee in their second-hand machine, and prepare Marcus's breakfast while he showered. She'd iron his shirts with meticulous care, ensuring every crease was perfect. When he emerged, already checking his phone for stock market updates, she'd serve him eggs Benedict or homemade pancakes, watching his face for any sign of appreciation that rarely came. Marcus Blackwood was a man consumed by ambition. At 35, he worked as a senior analyst at Henderson & Associates, a mid-tier investment firm where he felt perpetually undervalued. His colleagues saw him as sharp and driven, but lacking the connections and capital to truly soar. What they didn't see was how that frustration had begun to poison his marriage. The Chamberlains are throwing another yacht party this weekend. Marcus mentioned over coffee, not looking up from his tablet. David's promotion to partner came with a 7-figure bonus. Victoria set down her own cup carefully. That's wonderful for them. Wonderful. Marcus's laugh held no warmth. Do you know what David's wife brought to their marriage? Her father owns 3 hotels in Manhattan. She came with a dowry that could fund a small country. The implication hung heavy between them. Victoria had brought nothing but herself, or so Marcus believed. She had crafted the perfect backstory. An orphan raised by elderly grandparents who died during college, leaving her with nothing but a small life insurance policy that had long since been spent on their wedding and honeymoon. What Marcus didn't know was that the woman buttering his toast was Victoria Sterling, sole heir to Sterling Industries, a multinational conglomerate worth $30 billion. Her grandfather, Thomas Sterling, had built an empire spanning technology, renewable energy, and luxury real estate. When her parents died in a skiing accident 12 years ago, Victoria had inherited everything at age 21. But wealth had been a prison. Every friend was suspect. Every suitor potentially motivated by greed. The constant scrutiny of the media, the endless parade of social obligations, the cold efficiency of a life measured in quarterly profits, it had suffocated her. So when she met Marcus during graduate school, when he looked at her and saw only Victoria the art history student, she made a desperate choice. She placed her entire fortune in an irrevocable trust, accessible only through a complex legal protocol known to 3 people, herself, her grandfather, and the family's chief counsel. She became Victoria Miller, a woman with no past and no prospects beyond her husband's dreams. For 7 years, she had found genuine happiness in their simple life. She loved cooking for Marcus, loved hearing about his work, loved believing they were building something real together. But lately, the man she'd fallen in love with was disappearing, replaced by someone bitter and resentful. I saw Margaret Westfield at lunch yesterday, Marcus continued, his voice taking on a familiar edge. Her engagement ring could pay off our mortgage. Her fiancé is that tech entrepreneur from San Francisco, the one who sold his startup for $200 million. Victoria felt the familiar knot in her stomach. These conversations had become more frequent, always centering on what others had, that they didn't. Money isn't everything, Marcus. He finally looked at her, his green eyes cold. Spoken like someone who's never had to worry about it. Do you have any idea what it's like? Watching everyone around me succeed while I'm stuck in the same position year after year? I have ideas, Victoria. I have vision, but I need capital, connections, opportunities. You're brilliant, she said softly. Your time will come. When? The word exploded from him. When I'm 50, 60? When it's too late to matter? He stood abruptly, grabbing his briefcase. Victoria noticed it was new, expensive leather, not the worn canvas bag she'd bought him for their 3rd anniversary. Her chest tightened. "Where did you get the briefcase?" Marcus paused at the door, not turning around. "A gift from a client. They appreciate my work, even if you don't seem to understand its value." After he left, Victoria sat in the sudden silence of their kitchen. The morning light streamed through windows she'd cleaned just yesterday, illuminating the careful life she'd built. The ceramic fruit bowl from their honeymoon in Tuscany. The handmade curtains she'd sewn. The small framed photo of their wedding day, both of them laughing in the courthouse steps. She picked up the photo, studying Marcus's face. Had she imagined the love in his eyes? Had it ever been real, or had she simply been so desperate to believe in it that she'd convinced herself? Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. "Saw Marcus leaving early again. Everything okay?" Victoria stared at the message, then at her reflection in the black screen. The woman looking back was tired, wearing a faded floral dress from a department store clearance rack. Her hair hung limply around her shoulders, unstyled and unremarkable. She looked exactly like what she'd tried to become: invisible, forgettable, safe. But safety, she was beginning to realize, might have been an illusion all along. The truth arrived on a Tuesday evening in November, wrapped in the scent of expensive perfume and betrayal. Victoria had spent the afternoon preparing Marcus's favorite meal, braised short ribs with rosemary potatoes, hoping to bridge the growing distance between them. She'd even splurged on a bottle of wine, using money from her carefully managed household budget. Marcus arrived home 3 hours late, his tie loosened, and his usually perfect hair slightly disheveled. But it wasn't his appearance that made Victoria's. Blood freeze. It was the satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth, the kind of expression she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "We need to talk," he announced, not bothering to remove his coat. He pulled out an envelope from his briefcase, that same expensive leather one, and placed it on the dining table next to the untouched dinner. Victoria's hands trembled as she opened it. Divorce papers. The legal language blurred before her eyes, but the message was devastatingly clear. Irreconcilable differences, division of assets, a clean break. "I don't understand," she whispered, looking up at him. "It's our anniversary next month. We're going to what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp with impatience. "Continue this charade? Victoria, be honest with yourself. When was the last time either of us was truly happy?" The cruelty in his tone was like a physical blow. I thought we were working through things. Marriage has rough patches, but this isn't a rough patch. This is reality." He began pacing their small living room, suddenly too large for the space that had once felt cozy. "I've been offered a position at Ashford & Associates, senior partner track. It's everything I've worked for." Victoria knew that name. Ashford & Associates was one of the most prestigious investment firms in the city. "That's wonderful, Marcus. We can make this work. I can get a job, help with—" His laugh was harsh and cold. "You still don't get it. The position comes with conditions. The Ashfords are a family firm. They value tradition, stability, the right kind of partnerships." The words hung in the air like poison. Victoria felt something die inside her chest. "Partnerships? I'm marrying Celeste Ashford next spring. Her father, Edmund, has already approved the match. She's everything a man in my position needs. Educated, connected, beautiful. She understands the world I'm trying to enter." Victoria gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "You're having an affair." "I'm securing my future," Marcus corrected, his tone matter-of-fact. "Celeste and I have been seeing each other for 6 months. She's brilliant, Victoria. She has a PhD in economics from Harvard, speaks 4 languages, and her trust fund is worth more than most people see in a lifetime." Each word was a calculated wound. Victoria realized this wasn't a moment of passion or weakness. It was a business decision. She had been audited and found wanting. "What about our vows?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. "What about love?" Marcus stopped pacing and looked at her with something approaching pity. "Love? Victoria, you're a sweet woman, but you're naive. Love doesn't pay for penthouses or membership at exclusive clubs. Love doesn't open doors or create opportunities." He gestured around their modest home with obvious distaste. "Look at this place. Look at our life. We're going nowhere, and I refuse to settle for mediocrity. I have potential, real potential, but I need the right partner to unlock it." "I supported your dreams," Victoria said, tears finally spilling over. "I believed in you when no one else did." "You supported failure?" he shot back. "You enabled stagnation. Do you think Celeste would be content clipping coupons and shopping at thrift stores? She challenges me, pushes me to be better." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. Celeste Ashford was stunning, tall, elegant, with platinum, blonde hair, and the kind of effortless beauty that money could enhance but not buy. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Victoria's monthly grocery budget. "She's throwing a charity gala next week, $5,000 a plate. I'll be there as her escort, meeting the kind of people who can change everything for me." Victoria stared at the image, seeing not just her replacement, but her polar opposite. Where Victoria had hidden her wealth and chosen simplicity, Celeste flaunted her privilege like armor. "I gave you everything I had," Victoria whispered. "That's the problem," Marcus replied, pocketing his phone. "You had nothing to give. I need more than good intentions and homemade meals. I need a partner who brings value to the equation." He picked up his briefcase, checking his expensive watch. "The papers are straightforward. You can keep the house. There's some equity, enough for a down payment on something smaller. The car, the furniture, whatever. I'm not unreasonable." As if he were doing her a favor. As if 7 years of marriage were worth a garage sale. "I have a dinner reservation," he continued, straightening his tie. "Celeste is introducing me to her father's business associates tonight. Sign the papers, Victoria. Make this easy for both of us." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Victoria alone with the ruins of her life. The carefully prepared dinner grew cold on the table, the wine unopened, the candles she'd lit flickering in the suddenly cavernous silence. She looked at the divorce papers again, seeing her fate spelled out in legal terminology. Marcus Blackwood was trading up, and Victoria Miller, the woman she'd pretended to be, was worthless in the equation. But Victoria Miller had never really existed, and Victoria Sterling was about to remind the world exactly what her name meant. She reached for her phone, scrolling past contacts she hadn't called in 7 years. Her thumb hovered over a number she knew by heart, but had never dared to use. The transformation was about to begin. Part 3. The Awakening. The phone rang only once before a crisp, familiar voice answered. "Harrison Webb speaking." "Harrison," Victoria said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's Victoria Sterling." The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. Harrison Webb had been the Sterling family's chief counsel for over 2 decades, managing the intricate legal framework that protected their vast empire. He had been like an uncle to Victoria, watching her grow from a precocious child into a young woman crushed by the weight of inherited responsibility. "Victoria," he finally breathed, and she could hear the mixture of relief and concern in his voice. "My dear girl, are you safe?" "No," she said simply. "But I will be. Harrison, I need you to execute Protocol 7. Protocol 7, the emergency reinstatement clause she'd insisted on when creating the trust. It would dissolve the legal barriers she'd built around her identity and restore full access to the Sterling fortune. It was the nuclear option, one she'd prayed she'd never need. "Are you certain?" Harrison asked gently. "Once this process begins, there's no going back to the life you've built." Victoria looked around the small living room where she'd played. House for 7 years. The couch where she and Marcus used to watch movies. The bookshelf filled with novels she'd collected from used bookstores. The wedding photo on the mantel, now a monument to her own naivety. That life was never real. She said, "I need you to arrange transport to the city. And Harrison? I want everything we have on Edmund Ashford and his daughter Celeste. I want to know every business deal, every investment, every secret they think they're hiding. Consider it done. A car will be at your location within the hour." After hanging up, Victoria moved through the house like a sleepwalker. She packed a single suitcase with the few items that mattered. Her grandmother's jewelry, hidden in a safety deposit box key taped under her jewelry cabinet, some photographs from before Marcus, and the one business suit she'd kept buried in the back of her closet. Everything else, the modest clothes, the bargain furniture, the careful life of Victoria Miller, could burn for all she cared. The black sedan that arrived was understated but unmistakably expensive. The driver, a professional she didn't recognize, simply nodded and held the door. As they pulled away from Maple Street, Victoria didn't look back. The Sterling family penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper her grandfather had built in the 1980s. Victoria had avoided the city for 7 years, but now the gleaming towers welcomed her home like old friends. The elevator rose silently to the 68th floor, where Harrison Webb waited in the marble-appointed foyer. He looked older, his silver hair thinner, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence she remembered. He embraced her gently, the first genuine warmth she'd felt in months. "Welcome home, Miss Sterling." The penthouse was exactly as she'd left it, a monument to understated luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. But it felt different now, less like a prison and more like a fortress. "The trust dissolution is complete," Harrison said, leading her to his father's old study. "All assets have been transferred back to your direct control. I should warn you, the portfolio has grown considerably in your absence." He handed her a tablet displaying numbers that made her breath catch. $37 billion. Her grandfather's conservative investments and her father's tech acquisitions had multiplied exponentially during her self-imposed exile. Victoria's transformation began at dawn. A team of stylists, trainers, and consultants descended upon the penthouse like a specialized military unit, each expert in their field. The woman who had clipped coupons and shopped clearance racks was systematically dismantled and rebuilt. Her mousy brown hair was cut and colored to a striking auburn that brought out the steel in her gray eyes. A personal shopper curated a wardrobe of power suits from Milan, each piece tailored to perfection. The soft-spoken suburban housewife learned to walk with predatory grace in stilettos that clicked like a countdown timer. But the most important transformation was mental. Victoria spent 12-hour days immersed in briefings, market reports, and strategic analyses. Her dormant business acumen awakened like a muscle remembered, and she discovered that 7 years of managing a household budget had actually sharpened her skills. She understood efficiency, value, and the art of making every resource count. "The Henderson acquisition is complete," Harrison reported on her 3rd day back. "The partners were shocked by the offer. They'll sign by Friday." Victoria nodded, reviewing the psychological profile their private investigators had compiled on Marcus. "What about Ashford and Associates?" "More vulnerable than we initially thought. They're bleeding clients. 3 major accounts pulled out last month. And there are rumors about the SEC taking interest in some of their offshore investments." Perfect. Victoria had spent enough time listening to Marcus complain about his job to know Henderson and Associates was hemorrhaging talent to larger firms. Now she owned that bleeding company, and she intended to use it as a scalpel. Her first move was elegant in its simplicity. She arranged for Henderson and Associates to land a massive new client, Sterling Industries. The contract was worth $50 million in management fees, enough to make the struggling firm seem suddenly successful. Marcus would get the credit, along with a substantial bonus and promotion to partner. "Why are we rewarding him?" Harrison asked, puzzled. Victoria's smile was cold as Arctic wind. "Because I want him to think he's winning. Let him celebrate, let him feel secure. Introduce the fruit before you reveal the poison." While Marcus basked in his sudden professional success, Victoria worked behind the scenes like a chess master. She purchased the building that housed Ashford and Associates, becoming their landlord. She bought a controlling interest in the bank that held their primary business accounts. Slowly, methodically, she began to build a cage around the Ashford empire. The charity gala that Celeste was hosting became Victoria's first public appearance in 7 years. She arrived fashionably late, sliding from a Bentley in a custom Valentino gown that cost more than Marcus's annual salary. The room fell silent as she entered. Those who recognized the sterling name whispered in awed recognition. Edmund Ashford, a silver-haired man with nervous eyes, hurried to greet her personally. "Miss Sterling, what an unexpected pleasure. I had no idea you were back in the city." "I keep a low profile," Victoria replied smoothly, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "But I heard about tonight's cause. Children's literacy is close to my heart." Across the room, she spotted Marcus in a rented tuxedo, his arm around Celeste's waist. Even from a distance, Victoria could see his shock, the way his face paled as their eyes met. Celeste, stunning in emerald silk, followed his gaze with curiosity. Victoria excused herself from Edmund and glided across the room, enjoying the way conversations stopped in her wake. The sterling name commanded respect in these circles, and she had forgotten how intoxicating that power could be. "Marcus," she said pleasantly, as if greeting an old acquaintance. "How wonderful to see you here." He stared at her, speechless. The woman before him bore little resemblance to his meek wife. Gone was the discount store clothing and uncertain posture. In their place was a vision of confidence and barely contained power. "Victoria," he managed to croak, "how are you?" "I don't believe we've been introduced," Celeste interrupted, extending a manicured hand. Her smile was polite but territorial. "I'm Celeste Ashford." "Victoria Sterling," she replied, noting how Celeste's eyes widened at the name. "I've heard so much about you." "Sterling? As in Sterling Industries?" Celeste's voice held a new note, of respect tinged with wariness. "Among other things." Victoria's smile was enigmatic. "Marcus and I are old friends. We've known each other for years." She could see the questions forming in Celeste's mind, the way she looked between Marcus and Victoria with growing suspicion. Marcus himself seemed frozen, caught between his old life and new like a deer in headlights. "I should let you both get back to your evening," Victoria continued graciously. "Marcus, we should catch up soon. I have a feeling we'll be seeing much more of each other." As she walked away, Victoria felt rather than saw Marcus's eyes following her. Behind her, she could hear Celeste's sharp whisper. "How exactly do you know her?" The seed of doubt was planted. By tomorrow, Celeste would be researching the Sterling family, discovering the vast fortune Victoria commanded. She would start asking questions about Marcus's past, about the old friend who moved through society's upper echelons like she belonged there. Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from Harrison. "Phase 2 is ready when you are." She typed, "Back. Execute." Phase 2 was beautiful in its complexity. Over the next week, Harrison's team began a carefully orchestrated campaign of financial pressure. Ashford and Associates found their credit lines unexpectedly scrutinized. Several long-term clients received better offers from competing firms, offers backed by sterling money. The SEC investigation that had been simmering quietly suddenly gained momentum as anonymous tips provided investigators with detailed financial records. Marcus, meanwhile, was living in a fool's paradise. His success at Henderson and Associates had earned him respect and admiration. He moved into a luxury apartment, bought expensive suits, and began planning an elaborate engagement party. He had no idea that every step toward his dreams was being funded by the woman he'd discarded. Victoria watched it all from her glass tower, patient as a spider in her web. Marcus thought he had traded up, but he had actually traded away the only thing that could have saved him. The game was entering its final phase, and Victoria Sterling had never been more ready to collect her debts. The reckoning would be swift, public, and absolute. Part 5. The Reckoning. The end began with a phone call on a crisp December morning. Marcus was in his new corner office at Henderson and Associates, admiring the view of Central Park, when his secretary buzzed in with unusual urgency. "Mr. Blackwood, there's a Miss Sterling on line 1. She says it's regarding your employment contract." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. He'd been avoiding Victoria's calls for weeks, assuming she was simply being bitter about the divorce. But Sterling Industries was Henderson's biggest client now. The client responsible for his promotion, his new salary, his entire transformed life. "Put her through," he said, his voice barely steady. "Hello, Marcus." Victoria's voice was crisp, professional, utterly unlike the woman he'd been married to. "I trust you're enjoying your new position." "Victoria, if this is about the divorce papers, this isn't about our marriage," she cut him off smoothly. "This is about your job. I'm calling to inform you that Sterling Industries will be terminating our contract with Henderson and Associates, effective immediately." The words hit him like physical blows. "You can't do that. We have a binding agreement." "Please review Clause 17 of the contract," Victoria replied. "There's a 30-day termination option for any reason. Consider this your official notice." Marcus scrambled through the paperwork on his desk, finding the contract he'd reviewed dozens of times. There it was, in legal black and white, an escape clause he'd somehow missed. Without Sterling Industries, Henderson and Associates would lose over 60% of their revenue. The firm would collapse, taking Marcus's partnership and reputation with it. "Why?" he whispered. "Because I can," Victoria replied simply. "You should probably clear out your office before the news breaks. I imagine Mr. Henderson will want to speak with you quite urgently." The line went dead. Marcus sat in stunned silence, watching his new life crumble around him like a house of cards. Outside his window, the city continued its relentless pace. Oblivious to his personal apocalypse, the second call came an hour later, from a frantic Edmund Ashford. "Marcus, we need to meet immediately. Something's happening to our accounts." They met at Ashford and Associates, where Edmund was pacing his office like a caged animal. Celeste sat in a leather chair, her usual composure cracked with worry. "It's a coordinated attack," Edmund explained, his face pale with stress. "Our credit lines have been frozen. 3 major clients withdrew their accounts this morning. The building management is demanding immediate payment of 6 months' rent in advance." "That's impossible," Marcus said, though his stomach was already sinking. "The SEC investigation has been escalated," Celeste added, her voice tight. "They're requesting 5 years of financial records by tomorrow, and they're asking specifically about our offshore investments." Edmund stopped pacing and fixed Marcus with a desperate stare. "This started after you introduced us to that Sterling woman at the gala. What exactly is your relationship with her?"